Big Nunu's Little Heist. I can't even wait to the end. I can't carry the fake suspense. This was a great movie for me. I loved it and I want to talk about it. It starred some of South Africa's greats like Kagiso Lediga, who was also an executive producer in the movie, Celeste Ntuli, Tony Miambo, and Jefferson Chabalala, Ukanyisa Bunu, Pops, Daniel Hadebe, and a lot more. And it was written and directed by Andy Gazwells. Big Nunu's Little Heist is an action comedy that moves away from South Africa's slapstick comedy, which relies on exaggerated expressions and stunts for laughs. And although it still has some goofy moments,
Malini? Million. 5 or 6 million.
they're not a point of focus. It doesn't linger on these and doesn't use them to drive the story. The movie is an independent film licensed to Netflix, which I think explains why it felt they were able to go far and wide with their creativity and make something different. So the movie follows a delivery man, played by Jefferson. Delivery man's stove is stolen, and when he tries to find it and confronts the people that stole it, the crew leader, Nunu or Big Nunu, played by Tony, recognizes his excellent shooting skills, and he tries to recruit Delivery Man into the crew as they plan to do a heist. With the money, Big Nunu plans to reopen the old factory that was closed down by the government and provide jobs for the community, while Delivery Man will be able to buy the stove before his boss finds out it's been stolen. The movie is set in Escotipola, which I think is a real place in Cosmo City, because when you look it up, Escotipola Secondary School pops up. Reviews about the movie call it a low-budget film that was able to make the most of its strength, which is what I love about it. From the shooting style to the writing and attention to some details, there's so much to appreciate about this movie. The opening sequence shows in the background the long transition from the city to trying to find Escotipola. The delivery man even says this area doesn't even show on the GPS, which is obviously common for a lot of South African places outside of cities. We find that Escotipola is a township that came about when the factory opened, and when the factory closed down, the people who now lived there lost their livelihoods, and the community that now existed was left to fend for themselves without any resources or aid from the government. The first shot shows us a framed picture of the delivery boss's retirement place, which is a nice suburban home with the sticker "Home Sweet Home." And he highlights how the closest the delivery man could ever be to visiting the retirement area is by being at Escotipola. And this tells us that this is an area that can never be attainable for the general working public, or as Americans call it, the blue-collar workforce. We see Christmas Tree watching TV, and it's an ad about the dream home, offering a stress-free, balanced life.
You dream of the real life, a stress-free, balanced life. Then you need a dream home.
Again, we see him when he's guarding Delivery Man, and when Delivery Man breaks free from being tied up, he ends up hitting him with a remote right as the ad says, "the real life," which gives us the switch between his fantasy land and his real life. Channels change as they fight, from a riot show and an explosion which mirrors Christmas Tree's real life of being a gangster and involved in fights instead of daydreaming about the life in a dream home. Towards the end, we also see him holding up the same remote as he gets shot by the police when they thought he was holding a gun, dying without ever getting close to what he dreamed of. Getting a dream home, even if it's not one of the homes in the retirement village, is the driving vision for our characters. We see how Big Nunu is community-centered and has the idea of his whole community getting this through financial freedom once he gives them jobs. But Delivery Man doesn't care too much about this idea for everyone else. Just wants his cut so he can be able to have a home for himself. After the stained money reigns over the community, Big Nunu and the crew are taken by the police, and Big Nunu realizes his dream will never happen. But the mayor announces that they can all use the money for one day, and we hear on TV that they all use it to buy one dream home, as suggested by Delivery Man, where they can alternate in staying at. It shows Big Nunu's influence on Delivery Man and his thinking being for the better of everyone else as well. But this is where fiction comes in, and the creator, I think, chose to give the people of Skodipola a happy ending, because it is illegal to actually use ink-stained money. And so in reality, the idea of people like people from Skodipola, the idea of getting a dream home will always be a fantasy that most die without attaining, just like Christmas tree. When the crew gets busted, Not Yet Uhuru, which means not yet free, plays in the background. Very on the nose, but shows that we have a very long way before getting financial and economic freedom. Big Nunu's efforts were in competition with Energink. This is the private corp that supplied gas in association with the government, is part of the Dream Home owners, and is associated with the security company that they steal from. At the end, Energink won the fight against Big Nunu's dreams. He was no match for a big corporation that was already thinking about green energy, which is far ahead of his core business. They end up demolishing the factory that Big Nunu has dreamed about bringing back to create jobs for the whole community. We get a shot of his dreams going up in smoke, with the chimney where all the money they stole was blown out, and the factory going up in dust. In the final scene, after the crew is apprehended, a cloud of dust blinds the police and they escape. It's unclear how this all happened. My thoughts are that Mafia maybe was shot but probably didn't die, and he was able to help them escape once they were covered by the dust. If you listen closely, I think you can hear his voice as he says, unless that was Notch, I don't know. We also see Mumsy keeps some of the money on her but says the lock was already open, and obviously this money was taken by Delivery Man because we see him use that same lock at the end in the van. Now, the professor for me was a big question mark character. He appeared on the movie 4 times. When they showed Delivery Man Uhuru and he explains how the ink is removed, when Big Nunu has brought his mother's team of cleaners, when the mayor is making a speech, and when the police are trying to get through the crowd towards the end. I've thought about this long and hard and still couldn't figure out what these last 2 scenes were trying to tell us about the professor. If you have a theory, please let me know in the comments. Overall, I really enjoyed this movie. I like how it was shot. I love the use of isiXhosa and isiZulu, which made it feel so authentic. Big Nunu's voice, I will say, raised my eyebrows when it came up initially, and it took me a bit to get used to.
Why?
Then I was eventually convinced of this character. Tony explains in an interview that Big Nunu's voice was inspired by the mood of the afternoon he had the day of the audition. And after hearing the person who was auditioning before him using a typical rough gangster voice, he knew that that was not the type of gangster he'd be. So thanks to that self-care afternoon he had, we got the iconic Nunu voice. He goes on to give thanks to Andy, the director, for opening the opportunity for him to actually create this kind of gangster, and says range is only as good as opportunity that's offered. I think Jefferson's words are perfect to close off this video. It's different, it's a fresh take and has some new faces. We complain about not having new fresh content in South Africa, and this is one of the shows that's moving into that different direction. He emphasizes that you don't have to like the story or how the movie's done, but you should open yourself up to seeing something different in South African film, and how this can start opening up new films to moving to a range of different directions. Thank you for listening.